What happens when a reporter asks the wrong question, and instead of taking the bait, a member of Congress tells the uncomfortable truth? That's exactly what you're about to witness when Ilhan Omar was asked for a message to protesters who were doing unlawful acts. And what followed wasn't a dodge. It wasn't a deflection. It was a full-scale indictment of how this administration is lying to the American people about immigration enforcement, public safety, and who is actually creating chaos in our communities. Before we get into it, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Liberal Affairs, and stay locked in because the truth is getting buried under talking points, and somebody has to dig it back up.
Next question.
Representative Omar, Representative Morrison, two questions. One, I've spoken to some people that were detained here in Minnesota that are undocumented that are now in an El Paso facility, and they say that someone told them that no Minnesota detainees are allowed visitors. I'm wondering if you guys have spoken with anyone that has been detained there, and if you're working to try to get them to be able to get visitors. And then my second question is, we have seen protests be peaceful, but MPD did say on Wednesday night that there were rocks and ice thrown at officers as well as fireworks. I'm wondering if you have anything to say to those protesters who were doing unlawful acts.
I'm going to take the first one. So last night at dinner, and in the last few weeks, we've certainly heard in cases where people have been picked up, many of them who had lawful status in this country. We've heard a Sudanese immigrant who went in for his scheduled green card appointment. And was told that he wouldn't have his interview and was picked up, sent to Texas. Our office has tried to get information about his whereabouts. I know that Senator Tina Smith's office has tried to get information on his whereabouts. We also know that his family has tried to have lawyers get information on his whereabouts. We also know about a grandmother who was picked up as she was driving her grandchildren. The grandchildren were left in the car without a driver as the grandmother was taken away. We still don't have information, so I can go on and on in many of these cases, and I still have not heard a single case in this search where someone who was a criminal, undocumented, being picked up from the street. Many of the cases that DHS, at least to my knowledge, and I would love for them to provide us the dates in which they were picked up and from where in our communities, or what operation produced some of these people that they are putting forth, saying, they've taken off the hardened criminals off the street, because it is my understanding that many of those people were already adjudicated, already serving prison sentences, and many of them are still serving their prison sentences in many of the prisons throughout the state, and they're just taking their mugshots and submitting the charges of what they've been convicted of as a proof of the people that they're picking up. So I would love more accuracy of information, as they say they're the most transparent administration, which is the biggest lie told on American soil, I believe. It is the least transparent. It is the most corrupt. It is the one administration I have seen lie to us, even though we have an accurate documentation of their lies, even if we are witnesses to the lies. And then I would say, lastly, to your point, this, again, is one of those operations where they say they were carrying out an operation, and then we hear from Minneapolis Police Department say they just raced a random guy in the middle of the street into his home, and then ended up shooting him, and there was someone who was pregnant, and then there was tear gassing being thrown into a car where a man talked about having 6 of his children in the car, where a 6-month-old was tear gassed and was hospitalized. So when we think about where the chaos is coming from, who is creating these violent environments, those are ICE agents. That's Border Patrol. If they carried out their operations in the way in which they used to carry them out, where we knew where they were going in, they would give a heads up to law enforcement, local law enforcement, that that's where they were going. There was an understanding of who they were looking for, and instead of storming a whole neighborhood, jumping out of cars, running up on people with massive guns drawn, maybe we wouldn't have any of this. And I do hope that the administration and Kristi Noem understand that de-escalation comes from them removing this occupation. It comes from them taking ICE off our streets, and it comes from them stopping this rhetoric of blanket saying that Minnesota is full of criminals, because Minnesota is not full of criminals. Minnesota is an incredible state that welcomes people, that is generous, but it's also a state where lawful people reside.
Let's start with the framing of that question. Do you have a message for protesters who were doing unlawful acts? Notice what's happening there. The assumption is baked in. The blame is pre-assigned. The violence is already attributed not to the people carrying out armed raids, not to the federal agents disappearing people across state lines, but to protesters reacting to that reality. That framing is intentional, and Ilhan Omar didn't let it slide. She immediately redirected the conversation to what her office, Senator Tina Smith's office, and families on the ground are actually seeing people with lawful status being detained, transferred, and effectively disappeared without transparency. She described a Sudanese immigrant who showed up for a scheduled green card appointment and was instead taken into custody and shipped to Texas. No notice, no explanation, no information given to his family, to his attorneys, or to members of Congress trying to perform basic oversight. That alone should stop every American in their tracks. Because this isn't about criminals being taken off the street. This is about people following the law and being punished anyway. Then she described a grandmother detained while driving her grandchildren, leaving children alone, in a car on the side of the road, while ICE took her away. Again, no transparency, no follow-up, no accountability. And here's the most damning part. Omar says she has yet to hear a single case where someone was picked up directly from the community who matched the administration's claim of being a dangerous, undocumented criminal. Instead, what DHS appears to be doing is taking mugshots of people already incarcerated, already adjudicated, already serving sentences, and then using those images to create the illusion of an active street-level crackdown. That's not transparency. That's propaganda. When Omar calls this administration the least transparent and the most corrupt, she's not speaking in hyperbole. She's describing a pattern where facts are withheld, locations are concealed, and even members of Congress are denied access when attempting lawful oversight. And when lawmakers are blocked from oversight, that's not just an immigration issue, that's a democratic crisis. Then comes the part the media doesn't want to amplify. Omar directly challenges the idea that protesters are the ones creating violence. She points to ICE and Border Patrol agents storming neighborhoods, jumping out of unmarked vehicles, drawing weapons, and executing operations without coordination with local law enforcement. She references cases where tear gas was deployed into cars with children inside. A 6-month-old hospitalized after exposure. A pregnant woman caught in the middle of a raid. A man shot in his own home after ICE allegedly entered without proper coordination. Ask yourself this. If that happened in your neighborhood, would you call the resulting protests unlawful acts, or would you call them a response to state violence? Omar makes a critical point that Republicans never want to address. De-escalation starts with the federal government. It starts with coordination, transparency, and restraint. It starts with not treating entire neighborhoods like enemy territory. She explains that in the past, ICE operations involved notice to local law enforcement, clear targets, and limited scope. What we're seeing now is indiscriminate, militarized enforcement that treats communities as hostile zones. And then comes the line that should be headline news. She says de-escalation will come when ICE is taken off the streets, when the administration stops occupying neighborhoods and stops the rhetoric that paints Minnesota as full of criminals. Because Minnesota isn't full of criminals. It's full of families, workers, citizens, lawful residents, people who contribute to their communities and deserve to know where their loved ones are when the government takes them. Her colleague reinforces this point by describing lawmakers being denied access to detention facilities, denied even the names of people being transferred out of state. People sent from Minnesota to Texas and Louisiana without notice, without tracking, without explanation. That's not how a constitutional democracy functions. And when lawmakers made a personal plea invoking recent tragedies in Minnesota, asking for cooperation to lower tensions, they were told, "We don't care." That is the moment where this stops being about immigration policy and becomes about power. Because when the government stops caring whether communities trust it, whether oversight exists, whether children are harmed, that's not law enforcement. That's authoritarianism. Now, let's be clear about one thing. Omar explicitly states that people should not throw rocks or fireworks at law enforcement. She draws a distinction between lawful protest and unlawful conduct. But she also insists on something Republicans refuse to acknowledge. ICE is not local law enforcement, and conflating the two is dangerous. Local police chiefs are already saying ICE's presence is making their jobs harder, not easier. Trust is eroding, fear is spreading, and chaos is being manufactured not by protesters, but by a federal strategy that thrives on confrontation. So when the reporter asks for a message to protesters, Omar gives a message to the administration instead. Stop lying, stop hiding, stop escalating, and stop treating entire states as criminal enterprises. That's leadership. That's what accountability actually sounds like. And it's why moments like this matter. Because the narrative being sold to the public is collapsing under the weight of documented reality. If you want more breakdowns like this where we strip away the spin and confront power with facts like this video, subscribe to Liberal Affairs and share it. Silence is exactly what secrecy depends on. And we're not giving it that luxury.